Hello and welcome to this session, which is all about retirement. So can you retire? Should you retire? Can you afford to retire? So today with me is Mary Waring of wealth4women.biz. That's wealth and the number 4 women.biz, and all the details will be under the video. So welcome, Mary.
Paula, thank you so much for inviting me.
So I first met Mary years ago, and at that time I was introduced to Mary as a financial advisor who worked specifically with women, and you've continued along that road, but you also work with men as well, don't you?
I do. My company is called Wealth for Women, and really I was always aiming it at women who felt uncomfortable about finance, probably because they were married and their husband looked after it. And my service was all about very down-to-earth advice, no jargon, and to help you feel confident and secure about the finance. And I called it Wealth for Women so that it was aimed specifically at women who were feeling uncomfortable, but I do have male clients as well. And I have some clients who are couples.
Yeah.
I'm not anti-men.
So the reason for today's session actually is partly inspired by my dad, in that my dad was an accountant and he was made redundant probably in his mid-50s. And he did a couple of interim jobs after that, but never really went back to work. And I think after about the age of 56, 57 maybe, he just gave up and retired. I have to say, I think he really enjoyed his retirement. He died last year, but he had a good over 20 years of retirement. And, he and my mum, went traveling, went to their favorite places year after year. My dad got to read, do the garden, played quite a lot of PlayStation. And my dad was an accountant, so he'd obviously been very shrewd with his money, and having sorted out his affairs, I now know that he had a number of pensions which probably set him up, and shares and national savings certificates and so on. So obviously my dad knew what he was doing, but there are a lot of us out here, me included, that maybe are not quite so sure. So I'm speaking particularly today of those people that have been made redundant and they may be in their mid-50s and upwards, who are thinking, will I get another job? I know there was a piece in the Daily Telegraph recently about some women over 50 after redundancy and COVID may never be working again, which was quite a scary piece. Don't know if you saw that, Mary.
I didn't see it, no, but I can understand the reasoning behind that. When we've got a real shortage in the job market, yeah, I can see why women over 50 may not look hugely attractive to employers.
So it could be that you're forced thinking about retirement, or it could be that you actually do want to by choice. Okay, so whatever your reasons, if you're thinking about retirement, how can we work out if we have enough to retire on, Mary?
Yeah. Oh, the $64,000 question. I often get clients say to me, how much money do I need? And there isn't a one size fits all. So that would be the equivalent of, for example, sitting around with your friends saying, I'm going to get a new job. What salary do I need?
Yeah.
Because for all of us, often the more money you've got, the more you spend. You have a different lifestyle. So the amount of money you need depends on your lifestyle. The earlier you retire, cut hours, stop working, however we want to phrase it, the more money you need in the pot, obviously. And the more lavish a lifestyle that you'd like, the more you need in the pot. As a very, very rough rule of thumb, because we all need some form of guidance, if you were retiring early 60s, so if you retire sort of 55, you need a little bit more. Early 60s, you'd probably be looking to have a pot of something like 20 times the annual income you'd like to draw. So for some very rough numbers, if you wanted to draw £20,000 a year, you'd probably need a pot of somewhere in the region of 400,000, which of course sounds enormous when you're looking at drawing 20, but if you're 60, you might be drawing that pot for 30 years or longer. And that is why you need that sort of size pot. So I can't say, oh, you need a pot of X thousand, but for someone who's very keen to retire early, or like you say, they've been put in the position that they've been made redundant, it might be that in an ideal world, they would have liked to work longer and they would have liked to have a bigger pot because they would like to have taken holidays and, treat the children, grandchildren, whatever it is. But actually, maybe their priorities have changed and maybe they would have enough now, but they've got to bear in mind they're probably not treating the children and grandchildren to the same extent. Maybe they're not having the same level of holidays as they would have liked in an ideal world, but actually maybe they do have enough. So I'd say, to get a rough idea, work out what amount of money you would like each year. And think about, do you want to have a lot of holidays, or are you happy going camping in the UK, which is obviously going to be an awful lot cheaper? Think about your priorities, what you'd like to spend, very roughly times it by 20, and have a look at how far out you are, bearing in mind what you've already got. But do bear in mind as well, of course, state pension, if you're eligible for a full state pension, is currently £9,000 a year. So in my example, when I said you might want to draw 20, if 9 of that is already coming from your state pension, or will come at a point at 66, 67, whatever age it is, at that point, you only need to start drawing 11K from your pension.
Yeah, no, it's a good point. And having, thinking about the income that you want, because, for some of us, if we think about retiring, we think about, oh, we're going to retire and go to Cambodia and
exactly.
America and all these dreams. And if you didn't have the money to do that, then in a way, what's the point?
Yeah, and that's it. It depends on your priorities, doesn't it? For some people, retirement is all about traveling, socializing more, going out with their friends more. It's lots of things that they didn't have the time to do while they were working. And if that's your route, you probably need quite a chunk of money for that. But for some others, it might be, I'm really not enjoying working at the minute. I'm not enjoying the stress. I would much prefer to have a more modest lifestyle and not have to work. Or I'm going to go and work at a much lower level and get a lower salary because that suits me to not be carrying all that stress.
Yeah. And when you say about, for instance, the person on the 20,000 who wants £20,000 would roughly need a pot of about £400,000, that doesn't necessarily all have to come from their pension that they've been paying into. They could downsize to top that up.
Exactly. It's a mixture of everything. It'd be whatever savings you might have, any investments, and downsizing. The one thing about downsizing to bear in mind, if you're in, let's say, for example, you've got a 3-bed house in outer London somewhere, I don't know, and you wanted to downsize to a 2-bed house, you're not going to release an awful lot of money. And by the time you've paid the various fees, the estate agents, stamp duty, and everything else, you need to do your research as to how much money are you actually going to release. But if you've got quite a large house, let's say in Greater London somewhere, and you want to move to a 2-bed cottage, I don't know, in North somewhere, well, you probably are releasing quite a lot of money. But I think as well, bear in mind that for each 100,000 that you release, based on that 20 times 20 rule that I gave you, that's going to give you somewhere in the region of £5,000 extra a year. So if you downsize and you release 50k, for example, that's not going to have a major impact.
Yeah.
But like I say, if you're moving out of London to a much smaller property, well, yes, you probably are going to release quite a chunk.
Yeah. Okay, so assuming, you know, you've done the sums and yeah, you know, you've worked out what your income is and you have got that, you know, that figure through your own pension, perhaps through downsizing together with savings. What's your next steps? I mean, I know with pension wise, this used to be, it was just an annuity, wasn't there?
Yeah.
Different choices.
Well, now pensions are so flexible. So it used to be you got an annuity, and for anyone who's not sure what that means, an annuity is you give your pot of money to the provider, the annuity provider, and the annuity provider is going to say, right, in return, I'm going to pay you X £1,000s a month for the rest of your life. So for anyone who's really concerned about running out of money, that's a nice setup, because you are always going to get money. If you end up living until you're 100 and the annuity provider maybe did all their calculations thinking you were going to die at 85, you keep getting money every month up until 100. But the downside to it is that if the annuity provider worked out all their calculations thinking you'd live till 85, and then something happens and you actually died at 70, you haven't had great value, but you don't get any refund come back into your estate, because the people who die young fund the people who live longer.
Yeah.
It used to be that annuity was the route everybody went. But, you know, there's downsides to annuity, as we just discussed, and annuities aren't great value because they're very much related to interest rates, and interest rates being totally rock bottom at the minute means that what you get for your new annuity is also really low. The way to think about pensions now is almost to think of them like a bank account, in the sense that if you had a really big holiday coming up this year, you could draw a nice big chunk out of your pension fund. And then maybe next year, you only draw a really small amount. And then maybe the year after, you want to do some work on the house and you draw a bigger chunk. Then they're really flexible. What happens is you can get 25% of your fund tax-free. And you could either take that 25% upfront or, you know, over a number of years, but take all your tax-free cash to start with, and then everything you draw will be taxable. Or you could say, for each amount of money I draw from the pot, I'm going to have 25% of it tax-free. So if you drew, I'm going to do some nice easy numbers for my mental arithmetic. If you drew 10 grand every year, 2,500 of that is tax-free.
Okay.
So it's really flexible, but the area of concern is always going to be, are you going to run out of money? You have to manage it really well, because otherwise you run the risk that you've drawn too much money in the early years and you get to, I don't know, 75 or whatever age, and you've got hardly any money left because you drew it really quickly, not understanding how much you were able to draw.
Yeah.
Or again, I get, you know, another example, which is also a bad example, a bad use of the pension, is you don't draw enough and you get to 85, you know, whatever age, and there is a lot of money left and you can't get it spent. And that's when you think, had I known, I would have drawn an awful lot more when I was in my 60s and my 70s. Yeah. I'd have gone out and enjoyed it.
Done those cruises, yeah.
Exactly. So, you know, the pensions freedom, which is the term that's used for them now, does give you a huge amount of freedom. But there's also a lot of responsibility there to make sure you know how to manage it because you're at risk of either running out or not spending enough,
Mm.
both of which are equally bad, I'd say.
Yeah. 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 I mean, so in one way, the annuity, when interest rates were good, was a good offer, because you know, it was like a salary. You knew what you had coming in.
Absolutely. You'd get your annuity coming in each year, you'd get your state pension coming in each year, and you'd be able to say, well, roughly I've got X £1,000 every year. And yet it's like salary. It then becomes really easy to budget.
Mm.
But the fact is, if you'd like to have that really great holiday when you've just retired, you don't get any extra money for it when you get an annuity. So there are pluses and minuses to everything.
Yeah. Okay, so what about those people who have done their sums and thought, okay, back to work and don't have enough? Should they just continue paying into their pension fund? Should they be thinking about something else?
The real plus about paying into a pension is that for every amount of money that you put in, because it's already been taxed as earned income, you get the tax back and you get the tax into your pension. So if you actually wanted to pay £100 into your pension, the cheque you write is for £80, and then HMRC add the extra 20. That's if you're a basic rate taxpayer paying tax at 20%. If you're paying tax at 40%, the £100 in your pension costs you £60. So there's lots of benefits to paying into a pension. Downside is you can't access your pension till 55. So if you were 50 now, you might want to limit how much you're putting in your pension if you're looking to retire in the short term, because if your plan goes wrong and you want to retire at, say, 53 because you can't retire at 50, you can't access your pension. And it doesn't matter how much money you've got in your pension, you just can't access it. It's the rule. And when you draw it, it's taxable. The other option you've got, if you're not currently using your ISA allowance, and ISA is £20,000 each year, and each year there's a new £20,000 allowance, you could start putting money into your pension. And when you draw your pension, that's tax-free. So you probably, in an ideal world, you want a little bit of a mixture of a lot of things going on. If you're likely to have a lot of money, money in a pension is outside inheritance tax. So if you were wealthy enough that you weren't going to be using all this money for yourself, it's quite nice that when you die, a huge chunk of that money is left in your pension rather than it's left in your savings, because that will not have inheritance tax on it. And with inheritance tax at 40%, that is a big saving. So yeah, it probably depends a lot on situations, but I would be suggesting try and get as much money saved as you can. For anyone who's working, often the employer has the situation where they will match your additional contributions. So again, if you could put in an extra couple of £100 a month and your employer also matches that, well, then that's going to have a really nice impact on how well your pension grows, with the view that maybe you can then retire earlier than 65, 66, whatever you might be thinking of to start with.
What about those people who are thinking about buying a second property, Airbnb, or let it out?
Yeah, a lot of clients that I speak to are very keen on property because we're all familiar with property. I am really nervous of anyone who only has money in property. So if you've got your wealth in your house, which you're planning to downsize at a point in time, and then you put additional money into a buy-to-let or Airbnb or whatever it is, you are totally, totally dependent on the property market. So if something goes wrong and the property market crashes, or just nobody is buying, that is all your money tied up in one place. And of course, what you can't do, if you had an investment and you wanted 10 grand, either because you needed to do some work on the house, or you wanted to go on holiday and have a really lovely cruise, or whatever it was, you can't sell just enough of your property to get 10 grand. And that's, you either sell it all or you don't sell it at all. If you've got a whole load of shares, will you sell just enough shares to get you 10 grand? As well, if the stock market isn't doing great, but you need money, you take just enough money that you need from your share portfolio. You don't need to sell all of it when the market is poor. But that's a problem with property. If you need money out of your property, you've got to sell the whole property all in one go. And if the market is low, you're taking a hit on everything, even though you might only want a small sum from it in an ideal world.
Gains, selling fees.
Exactly.
Have to pay tax when you sold a second property?
Yeah, it's capital gains tax on it. So a lot of people like property because they're familiar with it, and a lot of people are nervous of the stock market, but it's not flexible at all. I think if you've already got maybe a pension, investments, and some savings, second properties is a nice idea, but not to have all your money in property at all, because that's too much risk.
Okay, so you'd say tick those other boxes first.
Absolutely, yeah.
Okay. So if you haven't got enough money yet, so look at where else. So keep paying into your pension, overpay if you can, so your employer will match it.
Yes.
Fill up your ISAs, look for stocks and shares, that side of things.
Actually, I've got another thought which I hadn't mentioned, but all we've spoken about so far is adding to your pension and everything. We should all look at how much we're spending, because it's easy to overspend. Easy for everyone to say, I can't afford to do it. But quite interesting for all your listeners, if they go back to what happened at the beginning of lockdown, when we all stayed at home, most people I spoke to spent very, very little. Now, that's not really the lifestyle we all want to have, but for anyone who goes out and socializes quite frequently, if they go and buy a takeaway coffee and muffin quite frequently, it's amazing how much money can be spent without thinking about it. So as well, for anyone who can't afford to retire and maybe thinks, I can't afford to save anymore, I would suggest keeping a really, really strict record of what they're spending. And that's everything, especially, well, I was going to say cash, but of course, lots of us just use, contactless now. And it is so easy to just buy something on contactless without thinking, do I really need it? How much is it? We just tap. And then we walk out the shop, we don't even know how much we've paid half the time. And so I would say get an app, piece of paper, whatever's going to work for you. And every single day, as you're spending, write down exactly what you're spending. And then keep a record of it, analyze it by, whether it's coffees or your socializing or your train ticket or whatever it is. And I would say do it for a minimum of 3 months. And the reason I say 3 months is that if you only do it for 1 month, you don't know how representative that month is. You don't know if it was a particularly expensive month, whether you didn't do much, it was a lot cheaper. If you do it for 3 months, you can really start to see a pattern and then look at each line and say, what can I do to reduce that figure? But it'll be things like, if there's a lot of money going on socializing, it's not stop socializing, because that's not much fun. Who'd want to do that? But it's, how can I do it cheaper? Well, maybe instead of us all going out, maybe in the post-COVID world, maybe you go round to one another's house, so that each person brings something, so that instead of going out and spending quite a lot of money, especially, you know, alcohol is so expensive out in the bars and restaurants, instead of going out and spending quite a lot of money, you're still meeting up with your friends, but it's a lot cheaper. And that's what you need to do. Start to think about, how can I reduce this but still enjoy my lifestyle? Because we could all save a fortune and sit home and do nothing, and never buy new clothes and never go on holiday and never do anything. But that's pretty miserable, because why would anybody want to do that? It's, how can I still enjoy my lifestyle but save a bit more money at the same time? And someone I know ages ago funded a very nice holiday she had in, it was in the Far East somewhere, I can't remember, by bringing a packed lunch to work every day for, and I can't remember how long. Now, again, circumstances are very different now. A lot of people are working from home, but she was working in the city, going out to the sandwich shop every day, spending quite a lot of money in the sandwich shop. And that's what she worked out. If she made that small change, that was going to be able to fund her holiday.
Mm-hmm.
And I suppose that's what we've all got to do, just be clever, isn't it? To think about, if retiring earlier than 65, 66, or even at that age, you know, if it's really important to you that you have enough money to enjoy yourself then, and you don't want to really be wandering around the shop thinking, oh dear, I can't even afford to buy that for my food. You know, it just becomes important to try and save as much as you can now.
Yeah, and also good material, isn't it? No.
Yeah.
Doing that, we'll know, you know, what things we can cut down on and what things, you know, are vital for our, you know, good mental health.
Exactly. And so the whole thing about socializing, for a lot of people, socializing is being with your friends. Now, for some people, maybe it is having the most wonderful meal that you can, and therefore you do want to go out. But actually, if your idea of having a nice night out is to be with friends, and you're not that fussed about whether you got, you know, these meal deals that you get from all of the supermarkets, don't they? £10 for a meal deal, and you get however many courses you get in it. For a lot of people, that is going to be as nice an evening as going out to some pretty swanky restaurant and paying quite a lot of money for it.
So, I mean, that's partly about mindset, isn't it? And I know we've talked a lot about, you know, pensions and property and the financial side of it, but obviously you've spoken to a lot of people who've been through this process. Just to sort of wind it up, is there anything you can share with us about mindset over time?
Yeah, I think it's quite tricky, especially getting made redundant. I think if you've planned for your retirement, you're probably quite excited about it. But if you get made redundant, and you'd said you'd seen that report, a lot of women over 50 and unlikely to get another job, that's quite tough, isn't it? Because that's not your choice. But I think it's a case of looking at, you know, what's the best that you can make of it. You know, if you're a female over 50 and you're finding it tricky to get another job, I wonder for how many people, when they're really pushed into it, what skills have they got that maybe they could set up on their own? Mm-hmm. They don't need an employer. You know, they've had an employed mindset for a long time because that was what suited them. But actually, if it's really looking hard to find a job, maybe you need to think about, well, what else is available for me? They're also, you know, at the other end, they're going to be people who define themselves quite a lot by their job. They like going to work. They've got a bit of a hierarchy. They know they've got all these people reporting into them. these people can't get their job done properly unless they're there. There is a whole status related to work. And again, if that gets taken away from you, that can be really hard because, you know, if you just imagine, a lot of people when you meet, one of the first questions they ask is, oh, what do you do?
Yeah.
You know, and if all of a sudden you're redundant and you feel you've got a bit of a loss of identity going on, that's hard, without a doubt. I think there are a lot of places available which can probably help you with that, you know, very specifically looking at your mindset and how you deal with it. I guess it's a case, I mean, the bit of advice I can give is probably recognize it's going to be tough. And, you know, therefore it means you don't beat yourself up because you wake up in the morning and you're feeling depressed. And actually, if you've lost your job and you're worried about money, it's not surprising you feel depressed at all. If you live on your own and you don't have a wide circle of friends, maybe all your connection and interaction came with people at work. So again, if that's taken away from you, that's a total change to your lifestyle. And chances are you will be depressed. You'll probably go through some form of grieving process. And I think you just recognize that that's going to happen to you. But you then, once you're getting through your grieving process, you need to start thinking about, right, what can I do instead? It's hard. I mean, I've been made redundant twice a long time ago, both of them without any form of notice, you know, and it was pre all these rules we've got now where you have a 12-week consultation process or however long it is. It was literally, okay, you've just been made redundant. It was like the whole firm's just closed, go home. And it's awful. It really is awful. I remember, you know, waking up in the middle of the night and thinking, I don't have a job anymore. It is a horrible thing to happen because, you know, a lot of us have real friendships at work. I mean, that's just taken away from you. Or we like the whole pattern that we've got of you get up, you go into the office, you do this, then you come home. And it is a total change to your lifestyle. But I'd say just recognize it's going to be tough. And instead of worrying about the fact that you're worried, that you're upset, just accept that it's a very natural part of the process and start thinking about what it is that's important for you so that you can start making changes in the future.
And listening to you, Mary, you know, you've summed it up beautifully. You know, people are feeling grief, they might have lost their identity, they might have lost their social circle. And I think from my view and from what I'm hearing, I think it's important to say that, you know, retirement may not be an answer to all that, you know, and also don't rush into it. It may be something you need to consider for a while until things settle as well.
Absolutely. And it might be that you really want to have a phased retirement. You don't want to go from working 5 days a week to not working at all, because there might be the first couple of months when it's really, really exciting because you don't have to get up and go to work. But actually, what happens after that? And you do hear, I mean, these are horror stories, but you do hear horror stories of someone who's worked every day since they were 16 or whatever age, and they retire, and then actually they die not long afterwards. And a lot of that probably is you don't have enough in your life that's important to you. And for all of us who have worked from whatever age, your working day gives you so much structure that if that gets taken away, you know, for some people it's going to be great, but there are also going to be some people who will really miss that and will get to the point that, you know, maybe they're not getting up till the afternoon because they start thinking, well, I've got nothing to get up for. They don't do stuff because they think, well, there's no point in me doing it today, I can do it tomorrow. It is a really big change. for all of us. No, so I agree with what you say. It's not something to just jump at without thinking. You really have to think about, is this important to you, and is this what you want to do?
Yeah, yeah. So Mary, I know you actually do take people through the whole sort of process of deciding if they can retire, don't you? You've got a wealth review.
I do. I've got a service called Wealth Compass, and what it does, it looks at where are you now, where do you want to get to, and are you on track to get there? Because what we can look at, if somebody says, right, this is the lifestyle I really want, and let's say you haven't got enough money for that, well, then we'll discuss, well, what's more important to you? Is it more important that you keep working so that you earn more money, so that you have this lifestyle? Or is it more important for you that you'd like to reduce your hours and stop working now? And if that's what's more important, let's have a look at where we can cut back on things. Mm-hmm. So it's then looking at, based on what you've got now, exactly what can you do with it. So it's aimed really to give information. So I can't say it's better for you to do X, Y, Z, because somebody might say, no, I really, really want those nice holidays each year. And if that's the case, well, it will then be, look, you're going to need to work until age whatever to get enough money in the pot. But for someone who says, actually, I'm finding it much too stressful, I need to cut my hours, I need to stop work, you tell me what I can afford to do, we can then work it that way round. And what the software looks at, it assumes whatever portfolio of money you've got, it goes back to every 30-year period from 1900. And the reason it's 30 years is that retirement is often 30 years. And it will say, based on what you've got now, in what percentage of times, and there's something like 1,000 different scenarios. So out of those 1,000 different scenarios since 1900, in what percentage of times would you have had enough money? So if it looks at it, and you would normally, I think anything 80% plus is looking okay. It probably means you might need to review it as you go along. But if we did the work and it showed that money would only have been enough in 50% of the times, well, you're at great risk if you retire now. You still might say, look, I'm going to do it. I'm going to take the risk because then in years to come, I can seriously cut back elsewhere. But it's giving you that information as to how robust is your investments at the minute to ensure that they're likely to be enough for you.
Okay, that sounds a very interesting process. And again, it's not just people who are just about to retire, is it? It's planning their life ahead.
Exactly, it's future planning as well.
Yeah, brilliant. So all Mary's details will be below the video. So all that's left to say is thank you for joining me today, Mary. It's been really interesting.
Thank you, Paula. It's been really lovely to speak with you.